Hey, it's Vincent Marino, the Palm Springs posture guy, and we're just going to keep going over the same things over and over because it all comes back down to the same thing. How do you carry your posture, in particular via your shoulders, since it's the most mobile joint in your body? We're going to show you whether from standing, lying, sleeping, resting, driving. Look at this chair. What is this chair going to dictate to us to do? It's got this lovely little wood carve out inside of it, just like they used to do in our school desk, right? We used to sit in that little wood thing all day long in school, and the desk would open up and we'd carve our name into the top, and well, some of us did. But look at what this thing would have us do. This is even a high chair. But if you get in here, what happened? I sit back in this thing and it's caused my leg to go 90 degrees to my body. When we close 90 degrees, it makes us want to end up sitting like this. When we're driving especially, or you're at the computer, this is just what happens because you forget and you get lazy. It's just what happens. And then when we want to sit up and correct our posture from here, this is what happens, and it's not very good. You might do this. And even with your hands being out here working on the computer, it's kind of stopped us from doing this over-exaggerated posture that people would do if you told them to stand up straight. This isn't really good posture either. But in the chair, even if you're doing that, this is a lot of hyperextension in your back because our upper leg is at 90 degrees. So I don't know where man went wrong. I don't know when we first decided to start sitting in chairs instead of doing what we're supposed to be doing, which you see a lot of good, hard-working third world country people, they would outlast us all. They can sit there and work all day long, doing whatever they're doing, out in the field or in a shop or whatnot. They can sit here forever. And it's healthy for the body. It helps line up your intestines. And that's a big issue that we were going to talk about today. But I just wanted to show you, the chairs can mess you up. That's why you all see me pull in when I'm talking to you a crate, and I usually sit on the corner because I don't need this thing doing this to my legs. So I always get myself a little higher and take the corner so that I can sit upright. My knees are now lower than my hips. That allows me to be able to get a lean from my hips, not a crunch from my spine. And just by my legs, my kneecap rather, being lower than my hips, it doesn't put my lumbar into such a hyper place, and I can find a tight torso and keep my guts where they're supposed to be, which is going to be a main topic today. When we sit lazy, can you see that? How about you, Bettina? Can you see my gut sticking out?
Yep.
When we get lazy in our back bends, it shoves all of our organs up in our rib cage that we just crushed down into our open exposed belly. And in women, it's a little bit different, right? Because their plumbing is different, and the hips have widened if they possibly had birth. And so they've got a whole different way that all of their intestines and girly plumbing parts drop down into, and you usually see that they get a pelvic pooch. Guys look like they're drinking beer all day when they're being lazy, and women look like they pooch from the lower place. Well, all of this stuff, if you are staying in tone and with exercise and had known what was going on, you can prevent those things from happening. You have to have proper posture. And if we could sit and do that stuff and keep a natural tight torso, which is a natural girdle, it would keep all of our lower intestines, everything below the diaphragm, set into such a place just accurately and just right that it helps all of the upper stuff, right? Belly breathing is for relaxing, resting, meditating, sleeping. We don't belly breathe when we're doing an activity. Our belly can totally go like this and take big belly breathes and get nice diaphragm breathing, which helps us get a big extension of the diaphragm muscle going down, because the further we can get oxygen into the bottom of our lungs, that's where all of the good nutrient dense oxygen is. But everybody who's shallow breathes so much due to their bad posture, you never get that ideal oxygen into your body because you can't get your lungs to expand enough because you're sitting in a very bad place that they won't do it. All right? You can mess up all of your let's just plumbing from eating, right? Get the stomach and the upper and the lower intestine and the way the colon bend comes around. And I don't have all the names now on the top of my head. Sorry, I should have put a chart in front of me, but we can all go look up the fancy words later. But as the colon starts changing directions, a lot of them have bad kinks in them to begin with. And those kink areas are where constipation can start to happen. And when people can feel certain pains, sometimes they feel that, where the bend, where it transverses from the intestine down to, lower and left. And why we would sleep on our left side so that you don't have the stomach acids being able to get into the esophagus and all of that. All of these things could be related to your bad posture, and most likely are. And so the more you can keep your core, your girdle, right? All those muscles that are there, which is, as we know, the rectus abdominis six-pack. You got internal and external obliques that stop the racking. You have the deep transverse, which acts like a girdle. That's the one that can pull us in tight like this. And there are times when we need to be pulled in tight like this, but usually we don't take that posture for anything. However, all of them combine together. When the six-pack crunches down and the transverse pulls it in, you get a combination. And that, with the two internal external obliques, creates such dynamic core system that your spine's protected and all of your internal organs and fluids stay where they're supposed to be, and you don't start getting lazy like this, right? What connects the rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscles, to the rib cage down to the hip girdle, that little line of collagen in there that's like a tendon, it's called the linea alba, right? And when that starts to stretch out, especially from women that have gotten pregnant, they get a problem that's called diastasis recti, and that stuff starts to stretch out. We don't want this. You sit around lazy enough, you will stretch that thing out and cause those problems, and then it's really hard to reel them back in. This stuff promotes hernias up in this area when you can do that stuff. And then if you don't do that in other areas, as we spoke earlier, not being able to take neutral and get muscles to relax, you can get hemorrhoids from pushing out the other way. You need to understand that when we're basically awake, even when we're sitting, our core is slightly working. We are alive and active. If you're doing something on the computer, this is still considered us doing an activity. Our core needs to be somewhat engaged. If your lungs and everything start pushing down on the top of your diaphragm and you can't breathe properly anymore, this starts affecting all of the fascia. The most wonderful and amazing thing in our whole entire body is the fascia system. Everybody wants to go to the gym and do stuff to get the muscles to look big or to look toned and nice, but all of that stuff happens by it all being internally connected to each other via the fascia. And that fascia connects to the bones, right? And it's all collagen fascia. And we have different grades of collagen. Our ligaments and our tendons and all of the connective tissues like this, they're all a form of a collagen, but some of them have different fiber alignments, and some of them have a little bit of elasticity to them, and some of them don't, right? And our body can dictate this stuff via the chemical processes that we have inside. Women's hips can stretch out and allow that diastasis or that linea alba actually to elongate and stretch with a chemical change in the body to allow for pregnancy. But then we've got to find a way to return it. And maybe in the olden days when we didn't sit so much, that stuff would naturally return. But then we go back to sitting in bad habits in today's society, and it never gives you a chance to get these things to go back to normal, and so they all stay stretched out and lazy. So guys usually with the beer gut, women usually with the pelvic pooch. And again, getting deeper to all of that stuff being connected, that fascia system, that is your internal map. That fascia has pre-programmed holes through it that your veins and your arteries and your lymph nodes and your ligaments and anything that is connected via another system in your body, there's all passageways through all of that stuff. And if you crunch it all down and then you lazy it all out, you take all of those passageways internally and you just start crimping them. And we all know what happens when you put a kink in the garden hose, they don't work very well. Well, what is that going to do? That's going to start to cause your organs to not work right. They're going to start to age. That's basically what aging is. In one way, everything starts getting crammed down so much, it starts to lose its capability to flow properly. And then you start having different chemicals go on in the body trying to counteract this sort of stuff, and then we'll get a bad wheel going, right? That's a thing that happens a lot with inflammation and pain. Inflammation comes in and it calls in cortisol, and it sends off a pain sense to the brain, which in return causes the inflammation to come back. And so you have this, and you've got to stop one or the other, right? So we're trying to ice things, and we try to rest things to get the pain signal to come back, to cause these chemical reactions to happen inside of our body. So you have to take time off and rest. Everybody that gets hurt all the time due to their bad posture, then they don't want to take long enough resting and healing time, and then they just keep the stuff injured. So that's why posture is so important, because the healing time takes forever. We don't have forever to heal. So the better you stay in posture, you keep an automatic alert system to your body. And I'll tell you this, because your core is the first thing associated to movement and excitement to your brain and your nervous system. If you sit properly with a properly engaged core for any activity that you're doing, I guarantee you any activity that you are doing, when it becomes tired, the first thing that will let go first will be your core. So you have to realize that if I have a good engaged core and I'm doing something, and whatever I'm doing gets too heavy, guess what happens when this gets too heavy? My core will lift up, and I will try to find some other way to lift or get out from underneath whatever activity caused me to fail. So you can use your core as the ultimate gauge as to when you are done doing anything. You can properly do anything while the core is engaged, and the minute it gets too heavy, boom, my core is going to open up. That is how you don't get hurt. But when I go in and watch everybody in the gym, everybody trains with an open core. I watch guys hurting themselves on the bench press or doing triceps. You know, you look at a tricep, you know, when you're doing the pull down. They're sitting there bent over, their shoulders forward, and there's no core tension. They're either sitting there or they're doing it hypered in the back. This is wide open again. That's different than, boom, I'm crunched down on my core again, my shoulders are back, and I do my triceps like this. I don't do them like this, right? So many reasons a small change in posture will do you tons and tons of good. A lot of injuries in yoga. Yoga is causing these people to hyperextend in their joints because they see the rest of the class do it, or they see gurus on YouTube or something like that, and they're not teaching them the small differences that their body can do versus what it can't do. And there's a lot of hip injuries because, again, I would show this in some other videos, but you could get into a stance and you could either try to turn the hip to get squared away, and this is just too much pull on the hip joints, versus if you would have kept them neutral and turned from the spine. You see the difference? I'm turning from my spine. And this is definitely a wonderful martial arts technique that they do, so it's got to be good for everything else too, because that's the most dynamic. We don't turn and try to hip turn like this into my sockets when there's a whole lot more that doesn't telegraph that I can just boom turn from my torso. I can get great power that way. From here. There's no reason to lift that foot and do this, and you see a lot of guys teaching that sort of stuff, and I think it's very telegraphic and it's not good for the joints. So, how do we keep carrying on and get all of you to understand? I don't care if you're playing pickleball, you're doing Tai Chi, you're stretching, you're exercising, you're breathing, you're driving in your car, you're sitting at the desk. Your posture is associated to a proper light tension in the core to keep your guts from spilling out, and a proper positioning via the rhomboid muscles to get your scapula bone into neutral. When they stay in neutral, The antagonist and agonist muscles both are neutral, right? That means front muscles and back muscles are in neutral lengths to each other. Bad posture means this is too long and this is too short. I pull them back, see how this lengthened right here? That's short, that's lengthened. See how this is way long and I shortened it? This stuff aligns your muscle neutral to your fascia, which controls everything in your body. I know I keep going over and over it because everybody doesn't understand that. Bettina's back there going,
Wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up, buddy. All right, so is that good for now? Did we get enough? All right, we'll catch you all on the next one.